Hey everybody, hope you're doing well today. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the production, the arrangement, and the orchestration behind my newest track, A New Beginning. So if you haven't seen the first part yet, where we talk about the composition itself, so like the musical aspects of it, the melody, the harmony, all that stuff, go watch that first, and then come back, and then we'll talk about all the elements that make it up this composition and make it sound as it is. So I thought the best way to approach this video would be to go track by track and kind of tell you what each of these instruments are doing, and what their purpose is, no matter how big or small. So let's start right at the top. Before I start, you can see that I actually have less than 100 tracks. So in general, I don't like to have too many tracks because I'm a firm believer in less is more. And so, for example, I see some templates with 400, 500 tracks, and those are great for those composers who use them very effectively. But for me, I prefer to start off with a blank template. Number one, because my computer can't really handle it, and number two, because I'm just comfortable with it. I find that I can do quite a bit without doing too much with too many tracks. So let's start right at the top, and you can see here we have the Cinematic Studio Strings Measured Tremolos, and I think this is a true gem in the library. Essentially, all that I need to do is play one note, and you can hear a second note is activated right away after the first. So if you play it in your host tempo, for example, if I just go just like that, it sounds pretty realistic, right? And that second note after the first one is timed so it lines up according to your host tempo, which is really, really cool. So if I just play the intro, you can hear how it sounds. So you hear there at the top, you can hear that right? And then it goes all the way throughout because of that rhythmic motion. I think it really provides that sense of excitement and activity that I really like. Here I've basically done the same thing in the violas. You know what, maybe I'll actually extend it way more just so we can see exactly when these tracks are coming in. So here I have the exact same thing, the measured tremolos, but in the violas. And here you can see I have CSS violins, one legato, so 2 tracks of this. And this one up here is basically just layering on top of this one here. So this track and the violins one from Berlin Strings, these are the 2 that are layered as the main melody. So let me just quickly play you a little bit of this so you can hear the tone of these strings. Sorry about that. Right, so you get a very lush and full tone, whereas by itself, CSS sounds quite lush and romantic, a little too much for this track. And Berlin Strings is a little too dry and a little too detailed for my taste. So combining them together is such an easy fix, and it sounds so good. And the second violins acts as the harmonic voice for the melody here. Cool. And then we have some ensemble patches. This top one here I should have renamed as staccato because as you can see here, it's quite short. So this one here is at the very end of the track. And the one on the bottom is the actual sustains. Right? And then right here I have the low string staccatissimo from Metropolis Arc 3, and this is a monster, my guys. This is awesome. Right? Just hearing that tug on the string, that's something you can't replicate with other samples. So it's really cool that it's baked in, and I really, really like it. So with all these layered in together, it gives a really powerful and just rich sound. Sorry about that. Right? And that itself already gives you such a meaty feeling. Cool. And then we have cello spiccato. I mean, I have a couple of spiccatos, and this again gives you a sense of rhythm throughout the track. And it's kind of a defining rhythm in Nintendo and especially Nintendo music. So so it gives you a sense of rhythmic pulse that goes on throughout, and I kind of use it yeah, for the entire track. And then of course, just to balance things out, I have a legato as well on the bottom, just to make sure that it's still lyrical and it doesn't sound too jumpy. Now the bassist pizzicato essentially is most of the low end, especially in the beginning. I don't have too much in the low end going on. If you just listen here. So you don't hear very much in the low end, right? But when the pizzicatos come in the very bottom there, not only does it fill in the low end there, but it gives a sense of excitement and a little bounciness, you know, it sounds really friendly and upbeat. And that's why I love using pizzicato, especially for this style of track, because it's not as meaty, it's not as committed as a sustain or a spiccato or something like that. Like the pizzicato is supposed to sound kind of friendly and dainty and that kind of thing. So that's why I use that. These ostinato tracks play a huge role, especially when the melody is playing longer notes. These ostinato violins fill in the rest of it when the melody is playing longer notes. So for example, let's just hear this. So I was literally just playing a D flat major scale up and down, and this is the Berlin strings legato ostinato. So with the rest of the track, it sounds like this. Right, so you hear there when the melody's holding the note, and then here I have just the ostinato pattern going on, right? And so that just goes on there. That's more of an ostinato. Here I'm just basically doing scale runs up and down, and then that continues on throughout here. And then the bass is legato as well, just to add that string sound on the very bottom. And actually, in the sub bass, you know, I hold the notes, the bass notes as well. So you can see it happens in the A2, which is the repetition of the A section. So when I modulate to D flat major, that's when I add in the sub. And then I take it out when I have the bridge, because I don't want too much going on in the low end there. And then finally, when the B section comes in, then of course we want that support in the low end, so that's why I add it back in there. All right, let's move on to the woodwinds. So the main thing here is the solo oboe legato patch from Berlin Woodwinds Expansion B, which is the soloist library, and it sounds amazing. I layered it in with the violins legato. It's so expressive, you know? So with the strings, it sounds like. And if I take it out, it'll sound like this, the strings. I think it kind of loses a bit of the air and the magic in the sound, and I really like layering the oboe with strings and flute as well. That serves a really good purpose. Open fist just gives us a little bit of texture, so by itself it sounds like this. Right? And then I love using Hollywood Winds the scales because those sound so cinematic. And I think my favorite instance of using it is at the very end here, actually. You can see it's the loudest too right there out of all of these runs. And right here, let me just play this. You hear that? At the very end. So by itself, it sounds like this. I mean, I can't ask for anything more cinematic than that. That's just amazing to me. And then the solo flute kind of just comes in here and there just to kind of add a bit of airiness, you know? You know, it adds a bit of texture, which I like. And I have the same thing there because the track is looped. Flute 3 plays a larger role, actually. So here, this is the melody in the top end for the intro. And by the way, all these woodwinds are from Berlin Woodwinds. And then kind of the same thing here, so. The flute fills in an empty space there. Flute 1 does a lot, actually. So especially in this A2 section, while the main melody's going on, the flute's just doing this. Sorry, let me just play that. So it's kind of like a counter melody, you know? It just kind of goes on while the main melody is playing. And so you don't only hear the main melody, you also hear things dancing around, and this flute plays a large role in that. Bassoon legato kind of just outlines the bass as well. Adds some harmonic support. Hollywood wind staccato I used to support the cello spiccatos. So by itself it sounds like this. So we've already heard this rhythm in the cello. So layering strings with winds is very effective, especially in this fantasy style. Clarinet 1 and 2, maybe I'll just move it up here. These guys, I basically just use them in the bridge, so they're kind of soloist instruments. And that's all they do. I think it's the first time I've used clarinets as a solo feature in one of my tracks so far. But I really liked it, how it sounded. And then of course some flute trills I sprinkled in here and there, especially when I'm holding longer notes. And so let's see what this trill sounds like right there. So you can see like right before a section or right before I go into the downbeat, I like to throw in a flute trill now and there because it builds a bit of suspense and it's like your heart's fluttering a little bit, you know? Piccolo runs are just piccolo runs. Gives your ear something else to listen to. I love using the piccolo as long as it's not excessive and it doesn't screech. The two horns are basically the main boys for layering in this case. So especially in the B section, gives a really cinematic sound, right? And the trumpets kind of come in when I want to accent the top. When something is, I want special emphasis, I'll throw those in. And the 12 horns I throw in as well for just a fat feeling in the mid-range. And this is also doubling the melody. Now the Berlin Brass Horn Ensemble, this is what I used for the A2 section. So when the horns are introduced with the main theme, and then a little bit in the section. So you can see they kind of fill in the gaps when the longer notes are playing, you know? And then the solo horns here, I feature the most in the bridge part. That's where they play their most important role, I think. So right after the woodwinds play their part, clarinets, then I repeat this with the solo horns. Right? And the other role where they play a really important role is right at the very end to lead us back to the beginning. And then they just fade away and they're gone. So, you know, a solo horn can just add so much emotion and, well, class is a word I want to use. It gives you such a human touch in the track, and I really like that. And I think Berlin Brass is perfect for soft horns. It just sounds really good in the Teldex Hall. Okay, so the percussion, I've got a bunch of timpani rolls, and they always usually precede a timpani hit, you know, single hits. So maybe I'll move that up here so we can see. So you can see I have a roll followed by hit, a roll followed by hit, roll followed by hit, and so on. And these are from Cineperc. right? Let me show you another example. Cool. All right, what else do we got? We also got some deep booms from Metropolis Arc 2. Their booms are awesome. Like that is meaty, right? And then what do we got? We got a snare pattern that goes on. Now in Determination, the previous track I did, a few people noticed that I kind of played in a pattern, a 4-bar pattern, and then I looped it all the way throughout. And as a result, it sounded kind of repetitive and not very, not very good because it didn't have very much variation. So I thought in this track I would play through the snare track all the way through, so it had some variation and velocity changes throughout, and I think it paid off in this case. Just kind of a rhythmic thing to keep the track moving. Okay, so next we have the bass drum, and this is from Cinesamples, and I think it sounds amazing. Let me just play it for you. So let me just solo it. And then let's go to another one. Right. So different velocities trigger how much clack you get on the actual sound of it. So of course that gives it a human feeling too when you have variances in the same sound, right? Cymbals, of course, are just self-explanatory. Rising cymbals, of course, precede these hits, sorry. So the rising cymbals lead to the main cymbal hit, and that's how that works. And these are from Cine Perc as well. Okay, some harp glissandi. These are from Cine Harps. And I tend to do these right before a new section. So let me just play this in context. Sorry. So you can hear that little bit there, and then going into the bridge. And you'll notice that I chose a descending glissando for going into the bridge, because as the music subsides and loses its excitement, it just makes sense for the harp to kind of descend along with it, both in volume and in notes. And that's pretty much it. And then the harp plugs are just individual notes from Cine Harp as well. You can see I do them when I'm holding long notes. So, and the harp just fills it in. And then I have it here as well. Right? So it just sprinkle it in there. Now I have some harp glissandi, and this is from the new Berlin Symphonic Harps from Orchestral Tools, and it's their playable glissandi patch. So you literally just run your fingers up and down on the keyboard, and it sounds so cool. Right? So there's that. And then here we have the string runs from Cinesamples. This is the Cine Strings runs. And then by itself, extremely cinematic, just like their Hollywood Winds library. Cine Orc is also from Cinesamples, and this I use as a bed and as a supporting tool for my music. So for example, so it just adds a little bit of warmth and support in the bottom. And a little bit when the horns come in. And you hear the harp glissandi running through there. It's pretty cool. All right, and then we have the Orchestral Tremolos. And this is from Cine Orc as well. And this sounds very cinematic, so let me just solo this. And this is the full ensemble just doing tremolos back and forth. Sorry. Right, so There we go. And also riding the mod wheel helps. Cineorc is very receptive to the mod wheel's volume. Some string sustains. This is especially just in the B section to fill it in. And this is from Berlin Strings, their immediate sustains. And then these following 3 choir patches are all from the Metropolis arcs. So this children's choir is from Metropolis Arc 2, and the women and the men are from Metropolis 1. So I really like the sound of the children's choir. I mean, all these choirs, of course. But when the children come in, it gives you that ethereal, airy feeling. It just sounds so good, man. Right? And then when you add in the female and the male choir as well from Metropolis Arc 1, so you can hear the men then roar. So the females there sound really realistic, especially with the vibrato. It's great. Right? And then at the very end, and I didn't want to use the staccato patch there, the staccato articulations, because the choir patches here run through randomized syllables. So I didn't want them to go like, si kukuban, da 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 la, or whatever. I wanted it to still have their kind of sound. So that's why I kept it on the legato or the sustains mode and just played it many times. It's a very Nintendo-esque ending, you know? And then we already talked about the sub bass there. Cool. Okay, let's talk about quickly some automation moves. And the most important comes in from the stereo out. And I've talked about this in how I automate an epic orchestra, that video. But all of these other ones, you know, they're pretty basic in what I'm doing them for. You know, essentially these are just a finer volume balance. You know, that's why I automate. So in order to make everything feel balanced and fitting in together, you have to, you know, go through and make some parts louder, some parts softer. And that kind of prevents everything from sticking out or being too loud or too soft in certain places. So you can see just doing a few moves here and there can make a big difference. So let's talk about the stereo out really quickly. Here you can see I start off at 0 decibels. And then when I get to the A2, which is the repetition of the main theme, I bring it up 0.6 decibels. So this should sound slightly louder than the A section. Come on. Sorry, one more time. And it makes sense because, you know, when you have a repetition of something and the instrumentation becomes more involved and it builds an excitement, it makes sense for the entire composition or the entire track to feel a bit louder and sound a bit more present. And that's what this little boost will do for you there. And then of course I bring it back down in the bridge, back to 0, because everything comes back down. So now I'm back to 0 dB. And then when I loop everything, it's all the same moves. But finally at the end, just to give myself the big finale, I drag it up to 1.4 at the very end, just so you know you get this rise in volume and everything sounds like you're growing all the way to the end. So those final dun-dun-dun-dun should really feel really impactful, and that you really rose to it, and that's the, you know, the biggest climax in the whole entire track, which it is. So that is it. That is the orchestral arrangement of A New Beginning. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you kind of see, you know, how I approached a track like this, why I made some instrument choices, and hopefully that helps with your writing as well. If you're writing something like this, hopefully some instrument combos will inspire you, and you can let me know if you know what you decide to do in your own compositions. So in the final video, we'll talk about the mixing process and how I process the sounds to make them sound cohesive and the balancing and all of that. So thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in part 3. And again, if you haven't checked out part 1 yet, please do so, because you can understand the theory behind it and the actual composition itself and what went into the actual musical aspects of it. In any case, I look forward to seeing you in part 3. And until then, have a great day. See you later. Bye.